right. Should the Dolphins trade, sell, or stand pat with the deadline approaching, the trade deadline approaching November 5th? It's been a little bit of a talk, a little bit of a conversation. So I'm going to get into that today. I think there's three obvious tracks, the trade, sell, or stick. And each one of them has a different set of criteria that if you go down this road, it's going to kind of drive things in a certain direction. And, it's some people are totally down on Chris Grier. Some people, I guess, maybe are a little uncertain. Some people think he's doing a great job. And whatever we do, stand pat, sell, or trade, it's going to define the future of this GM spot. Or could, I should say, because any big major moves made by Chris Grier, whether to acquire talent or to ship talent off, it's going to mess around with any future prospects if Ross decides to get rid of him. But clearly this team, on the face of it, should trade. I mean, if you added a top guard to this team, Brewer's been healthy so far all season. I think Robert Jones brings some assets. I think Tehran, if he can stay healthy, that's a big piece. Jackson, I'm not a big fan of, but you can hide that if you had, say, a Hunt or some people talking about Quentin Nelson. Also, you can look at the DI spot. So this team could, we're in a hole, but the Bills have kind of wet the bed a little bit. Jets, they've just fired their head coach. They benched their OC. This AFC East, I thought, was going to be a much scrappier, competitively scrappier division. But now it's kind of murky. And with the Dolphins having an ugly start to the season, I thought they'd be sunk if the Bills and Jets had been semi-competent. Bills are still 3-2. I do think they're going to lose this week, and I think it's going to be very muddy waters. And so just, on the the overview of it, we'd be 2-3. They'd be 3-3, I think, apiece. And we would be in a possible position. I think it's a long shot. So adding talent would be a good thing for us, but I don't see it happen for a few reasons, although you never know. And shipping talent out, I think we could, but that would say a lot too. I think Ross overall is very disappointed. I think he's very disappointed. But I think he's holding out hope that he doesn't have to sink this whole thing. I think if we had lost to the Patriots last week, it might be a different situation. But I think the victory, whether you believe it's good for the long term or you don't, I think from Ross's vantage point, I think he is still in the position of trying to make this thing work. He doesn't want to get rid of McDaniel. He just tied a big contract into him. He doesn't want to get rid of Chris Grier. He's stuck with them all these years, and he's comfortable with them. So let me dig into it first. A trade. To acquire a player, it's very difficult to get enough value from what you have to give. If you look at our cap, we have $6 million this year that if we don't blow it, we can roll to next year, and we're going to need to. We only have $4 million available next year and 38 players. Now, we might get that boost of 20 to 25 million they're saying every year. But if you look at this economy, it's based on the economy. And if this economy is not doing well, and from everything you're seeing, it's not, we'll probably have more important things to think about than football. But from their standpoint, if that doesn't bump another 20, and even if it does, you only got, let's say, 24 million with 38 players and some guys to sign. And then you look at the next season after that, so it's 25, 26, we only have 13 million and 28 players on the roster. Now, you can get rid of guys, but every time you get rid of, say, a Tehran, then you got to fill that spot. You just save money. Ramsey's 33. Maybe he moves to safety, but then you got to get a corner. Chubb, you move off him. Okay. Then you got Phillips. He's injured. There's a lot of things going on, and this is not a clean slate to say we can just keep adding talent and getting this team to where it needs to be from a cap standpoint. And so I think there's a constriction as far as what we can do with the cap. In 27, you get 131 million, but then you got to add in Tua. Is Tua going to stay healthy? That's a big deal. So there's a lot of fog of war and cloud over this. I don't think Ross is selling the team, no matter what. From everything I hear, he's going to pass off to his daughter. So, and he's getting older. He's trying to put things in place. Sold 10% of the team. I don't think he wants to pass off a disaster if he decides to move on. Maybe he needs to say, I don't want to step out of this thing or whatever. So that's the overview on the cap. The trade, do you get enough back for what? I mean, some people talk about Quentin Nelson. This guy had a very tough year with injuries, and he started out great. Had 2 or 3 seasons where it was like 2 seasons. It was a little bit of rocky, but the last 2 seasons, he's been excellent. This guy's one of the best guards in the league. He's 28 years old, and you're going to have to pay a large sum for this guy. Now, you put Quentin Nelson between Brewer and Jackson, and you got Jones on the other side, and that inside zone stuff we saw against a very beaten and weak Patriots team, you'll be able to do that against other teams. You would have, as I said, with Brewer, who struggles with power a lot. He's very small. He's the smallest center in the league. But if you got Quentin Nelson, who's 330 on one side, and Robert Jones on the other side is 330, then you can keep him clean and let him do his movement skills. And I think it would change everything. But really, you're going to be paying like 24, 25 a year for him. And I think he's better than Hunt, but Hunt's a little bit younger and he's been in the system. You could have kept him for that. And can you put $25 million on books for a guard? Now, I'm going to show you that if you were to get a guard, as some people really hope for, and he's a quality guard, the assets you're going to have to spend as far as money and draft picks, it really gets to the point of you might be spending too much. It would definitely help you this season, probably help you in the future, but would you have too many big contracts? You'd have Hill with the big contract, Ramsey with the big contract, Tua with the big contract, Waddle with the big contract, him with the big contract. You'd have a lot of big contracts, and it might be too much. But if you look at this last draft, now, I'm going to get a little into the offensive line. This is the last time I'm talking about offensive line for the rest of the season until the offseason, because it just seems like I've been doing this dance for so many years, and all it takes is one little bit of success, and everybody says this. It's great after they all realize it sucks, and it's just kind of like I've said my point. I've said my thing. I'm going to talk about every other position, every other situation but the offensive line going forward, because I've made it known. I'm going to cover all the teams' offensive lines and deal with that. But this is my last hurrah for the season. I'm going to work very hard at making sure that prophecy stays true, or prediction, or desire. But look at this draft that we just had. I think if the Dolphins don't have a great season, they're going to be in target area for 14th. New Orleans with Fuaga, 12 pressures, clean time to throw, 2.41 seconds. The higher that clean time to throw is, the more difficult it is to protect, and the better, more context you need to add to these numbers. So, you look at us and you look at Paul, he's at 60 snaps, 3 pressures, and 1.91 clean time to throw. Now, I think Paul's going to develop, but I just wanted to get you to understand that almost over a half a second more Fuaga is been protecting. He's only given up 12 pressures. It's not easy. Now, he was the 14th overall first-round pick. You might not be able to find that talent. A lot of good talent this year in tackles. But then you get to the second round, Jackson Powers, a lot of people liked. He's only had 150 snaps, but he's got 5 pressures allowed, which is not a ton, considering he's just started, and clean time to throw 2.23. But he was a 44th overall second-round pick. Frazier by Pittsburgh, 4 pressures, clean time to throw 2.66, 51st pick, second round was the 51st. And then Baltimore, Rosengarten. I mean, some people saw him as being successful. I really didn't study him, but man, that was a good call. 6 pressures on a season, clean time to throw 2.59, and he was a second round 62nd. Then you got Beebe. A lot of people liked Beebe. I didn't really study him enough to think about center. Dallas moved him to a center. And he's doing really well. 5 pressures, clean time throw, 2.34, 73rd overall, 3rd round pick. Pooney for San Francisco, 9 pressures, but clean time throw, 2.88. He's doing a magnificent job considering how long they hold that football. 86th overall, 3rd round pick. Pittsburgh again, McCormick, guard, 170 snaps, 2 pressures, 2.66 time to throw. 119th overall, 4th rounder. And then Indianapolis, Bortolini, only 136 snaps, but only 1 pressure and clean time throw, 260, 117th 4th round pick. Now, some people say, what about Barton? I said there was going to be some problems with him. I was concerned with his ability to handle power. I don't know exactly if that's the issue. But he's allowed 10 pressures as center, but they're throwing him very, very fast, 2.12 time to throw. And so he's got a easier style job, and he's giving up a load of pressure. I think the guy's going to develop. I think he's going to be a good player. But I didn't put him up there because he's not a clear – like, to me, Brewer's doing better than him. And, you got to pay free agent money for it. But you could have gotten one of these guards or something like that, or Rosengarten, and you would have been better off. So that's why I didn't really put him in there. But you can see that it's very hard. There's a lot of guys that aren't doing well. There's a lot of guys that aren't doing well now that will do better down the road. Some of these guys doing well now might be struggling down the road. But there are guys to be found. You've got to have a number of picks to fire those shots. And when you find guys in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round in the offensive line, it's huge for your team build. It's huge for your cap. So if you get a Quentin Nelson, you're getting a stud. I mean, this guy's an absolute stud. I think he's even better than Hunt. I'd give Hunt 2 more years to see how he plays out, but he's been better than him since the start. So you would get an absolute stud, but what would you have to give? You'd have to probably give tons of picks and then players. So I'm just a little uncertain. And then if you look at the Indianapolis offensive line, they got Rainman, who is an unbelievable player, and he's about to get paid. And so you could say, well, you know what? Maybe they're going to pay him so they'll ship off Nelson. But Kelly's 31 years old, and I think this is his last year with the team. And if you saw in what I showed before, you can find these guys that are guards to play center. And it's happening a little bit more than it used to. I mean, Connor made the transition. Even Eichenberg made the transition. You're seeing guys that, BB. And so there's going to be a trend of getting these guards to play center. I think it's a lot easier to find a center. And so you could keep Rainman and Nelson locked up. You got Smith, who's doing pretty good. He's got a smaller contract. And, Tucker, they got another guy, Fries. He was doing pretty good this season before he went on IR. So from the Indianapolis standpoint, they got Richardson. They're all in on this guy. Can you take Nelson out and then have to go fish on that position next year? And then Fries, will it be as good? Will you re-sign him? Kelly, you could probably let go to keep money. But you want to see this guy, this Richardson, your number 1 pick as a quarterback, have the best chance to succeed. And you pull out Nelson, and you're going to have 2 poor guards with a guy who's a little bit slower processing. So I don't think from Indianapolis standpoint that they'd make this move either. And I just think it would be prohibitive based on all these things. And I don't know, from what you've seen is a lot of, you see defensive ends, you see some running backs being talked about, loads of receivers, but teams are very, very slow to get rid of offensive linemen because it's very hard to get an offensive line that's coherent. And you're going to overpay to get one of these guys if they're even willing to get rid of them. Now, the last part is why I think a trade is really ties the hands of Ross, and I think it would lock in Greer. And for me, some people like Greer. I don't. I think he's terrible. I think he's proven to be terrible. You can debate about that or whatever, but look at the results. They crash every year. This year, we came out into total disaster. We were told the offensive line's no good, or it's good, but then we found it's no good, but now we're being told it's good again. But our quarterback's injured. We're 2-3. We beat, we played one bad team. Jacksonville's got one win. I think Tennessee's got one win from us, and Patriots got one win. So 3 to 5 teams were bad teams, and we beat one and beat 2 of them and one, lost to one. Seattle is not really a good team, and they were gutted on defense. We lost to them, and then we got destroyed by the Bills, who are an above-average team struggling with loads of injuries. And so I just don't think this team is going anywhere this year, no matter what you put on it. I think you put Nelson, it might be a shot, but you're locking Chris Grier into this thing, and I don't see how you can. I don't know if Ross is going to get rid of Grier, and maybe they can make a move somehow, but you got a lot of ammo next year. You're likely going to have a good draft pick. I think it would be kind of crazy to do that. Now, selling. So if trading for a guy that locks Grier in, what does selling do? If they sell, and you know what? A guy like – the problem is that the receiving group is almost a glutted market. Devontae Adams from Vegas, Deontay Jones from the Panthers is being rumored, and Hopkins from Tennessee. And then you're going to add in, you look at our group, who do we got that's really bloated that we can get rid of extra capital? It should be DN, but Phillips is down, Chubb is injured. Who could you get rid of really that you can get some real good stuff for? And so it would really only be the receiving group and then Hill. If you get rid of Hill, you would lose $13 million. You'd have to roll that over, but then you would get $19 million. You'd be off the books next year. And that might set up a GM to say, hey, look, I got some maneuverability in my cap. I've got some extra ammo. I can cut more guys that I don't particularly like. Maybe that would make the job more interesting for another GM, because a GM wants to come here and, maybe you just pay him to the nose. But if they come to a place and you pay them a lot of money and they flop, what's the chance of them getting a job again? And I don't know how attractive this job is, because Ross has had a ton of problems with coaches and GMs and all kind of issues going on. Is this really an attractive spot, especially when you look at the cap, you look at all these bloated contracts on older guys? But maybe moving a guy like Hill off does make it a little more attractive because of the flexibility and the extra talent. So, the extra draft picks. And then there's hold. And I think this is the most likely scenario, because if you trade for a guy, do you get rid of a player along with picks so you don't have to give all picks? And then it will lower your talent base. And then so you're giving and taking, and is that going to bring success, or is it just going to put you in kind of like a stasis pattern? I do think I'd much rather have Quentin Nelson over Hill. I'd much rather have him. I think Hill's a great player, but you're supposed to have Waddle and OBJ, and so that's something you should be able to uplift this O-line. Look how good we looked when you can run inside. Imagine aiding Tua with an inside run game. But switching out, then what about Hill, who gets injured a lot? So then you get rid of Hill, and then Waddle goes down, and so I don't know. I think that it's not going to bring equal returns. I think Ross is going to say, hey, look, we've invested this much. If he's really serious about moving off of Grier, I don't know if he is. But if he is serious, if he's serious about winning, he should say, hey, look, you've been here 6 to 9 years, however you want to call it, from 2016 to 2019. You've had unprecedented draft capital. You told everybody this was going to be a successful season. And right now, unless it turns around, it's been a disaster. So you've got to make hay, or I've got to move off you. Again, I don't know if he's confident he can find a good replacement. You can move off Grier, and then maybe – remember the year after Bullygate, we couldn't find anybody. We had hired Dennis Hickey for a year because nobody wanted the job, like literally nobody. So he hired a placeholder until he could find somebody else, which is crazy. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe Ross says, hey, look, I don't know if I can even find anybody. Maybe I'm just going to ride with Greer this year and next year until, you know, I leave. But I think he's going to say you got to hold it. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. I don't think there's any real great talent that's going to become cheap for us. And as much as I'd like to move off Hill because he's kind of shown some issues in his character on the field and off the field, and he hasn't really been a productive factor so far. So you can see teams have been limiting him. And so, but I don't think we're going to trade. I don't think we're going to sell, although I wish we would sell. I wish we would. It could be a happy indication of getting off Greer. I think we're going to hold. I think there's a lot of excitement about trying to fix the things that you don't like on your team, but ultimately, most of these things don't ever happen unless you're, you know, fire sailing because you're getting out of Dodge. And I don't think Indianapolis is really in that position. You know, maybe Raiders, I think, might, because I don't think they're going anywhere. Adams is getting old and he's getting disgruntled. So I think he gets moved. But I don't see us doing that as well. But let me know what you think. What's your preferred option? What do you think is the best thing for us? Legitimately, not like, you know, like we're going to trade for, you know, I don't know, top quarterback or whatever. So, I mean, legitimate stuff. Do you think that we can actually turn it around if we get the right players here? Do you think it's not going to happen? Do you think we should sell some of these guys? Anyway, again, no more offensive line talk. Done with it. Or anything but that. So going forward, the only thing about the offensive line I'm going to cover is Scott and I are going to start putting on our framework grades. And those framework grades, as I've explained before, are based on the production of the offensive line. You can see how the OC views his protection by the pass rush mitigation calls, how quickly he throws, how many receivers and routes, all this stuff. I'll get back into one last time to show you what it all means. But we're going to start doing that on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then going forward covering that. That's the only time I'm going to really, for the Dolphins. All teams, I'll talk about it. Anyway, guys, hope all's well. I hope we do the right thing, whatever that is. You know, as much as I like Chris Greer, I'm tired of doing this. It's brutal covering this team and then being a Dolphins fan, and you can never get time off. And it's been crazy knowing that this offensive line's been holding us back. You might disagree, you might agree, but that's my eval, and I think it's got to have some credence at this stage now. So I think the only way I can keep saying is just not even talk about the offense. Talk about anything. I don't even start covering special teams, I think. So anyway, Curtis saying, be well, go Fins. Curtis out. Start building your own online sports book today by getting signed up with aceperhead.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.